Yep.
Very well, thank you. Oh, here we are.
Is it time?
It is in time. Thank you and welcome to the City Council meeting for December 3rd, 2019 at 9 a.m. Linda, if you please call the roll.
Deckent.
Here?
Dave Line. Soldner.
Here.
Iris de Carvalho.
Here.
Inskeep.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next. Looks like we have Pastor Peterson, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly, most gracious Father, it's an honor again to come before you and come before the city and to come before the council meeting. And Father, we thank you, Father God, for the plan and purpose you have for this city. And we just believe that maybe the vision will be caught hold of. And Father, it'll become better than what it is. And Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this meeting. And Father, we just thank you for this time of the season, this year. And Father, we just thank you that it's a blessed season. It's a time to be filled with joy, and it's a time that the city, that they come together and, Father, just have fun together. We thank you for these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Darrell.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
This is the time of the meeting. We invite those that are in the audience that want to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. If you could approach the podium, give your name and address, and limit your remarks to 5 minutes, we would welcome that at this time. Don't be shy. Oh, I got to take her.
We can use some more prayer.
Well, maybe, maybe not. I just got a couple of comments to make. You know, I'm out and amongst the city a lot, and I hear a lot of negative talking. And I know you guys have heard it too. And it's really frustrating to me that they put down the city that they live in. They don't have the guts to stand up and bring out the good points. And the sad thing of it is that chances are they don't even know what they're talking about. And it really bothers me because you know, you don't have to tear the city apart. You know what ruins a city is people. It really is. And you can chuckle at that, but it is. What ruins a business is either poor management or people. People stop shopping there because they got offended or some little thing. And you know, this city could be so much better than what it is if the people just wake up and smell the roses. And I just want you to know I love the city. I don't love everything in the city, and I know not everybody loves me, so we're kind of equal. But I just wanted to bring that up, that it's frustrating to me, and I have no problem telling people when they start moaning and groaning. And you know how many people they gripe about the city manager, the city council, and all that kind of stuff, and the planning commission? They don't even know where it's at, and they don't know a thing about what they're talking about.
Amen.
And so,
Got carried away.
so just to let you know, I'm on your side most of the time.
Thank you, Darrell.
We appreciate your
Darryl.
comments, Darryl.
Yeah, thank you for that, and you're not wrong. And I think it's our job as citizens and council members to try and inform folks and have conversations, and not cast stones, but rather have discourse and talk to each other so that we can come to understanding and actually maybe make some headway. Because you're right, we have our warts, we have our blemishes, but there's a lot of great things going on in Hutchinson, and we should be very proud and feel blessed that we live in this community. Do we have things we need to improve? Absolutely. But we try and make progress at that.
Yeah.
So thank you for your words.
You're welcome.
you.
Thank you, Darrell.
Anybody else want to take a shot at us? No. Just kidding. Very fine. Next item, if you would, please.
Item 5, consent agenda.
I will move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho,
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6, consider ordinance amending the comprehensive plan land use map designation for 935 East 4th Avenue.
Morning, Aaron.
Morning, City Council. Aaron Barlow, Associate Planner. Happy to be here this morning to talk about a rezone and a comprehensive plan amendment, if it ever gets up on the board. Thank you, IT. This is a request to rezone the property at 935 East 4th Avenue. It is currently, or formerly, the McCurdy Motors property across the street from the FedEx property in the old something casino. I can't remember what it
Yeah,
is.
Cowboy.
Cowboy Casino.
Yeah, that's the one.
McGraw's.
The property is owned by SB Properties. That is sturdy built. And the request is to rezone this to C4 to allow for outdoor sales of storage sheds and storage barns. There is actually a very similar business down the street, so it's a fitting use for the neighborhood. Here's the property in question. For some reason, this property was zoned and designated as industrial in the past, and this is a request to bring it back into conformance in a neighborhood that is primarily commercial. You can see its little spot there, both on the land use map and in the zoning map. They provided a conceptual plan for what they plan to do. This is just a sketch drawing. You can see there are, those rectangles would be storage barns that people could come in and look at and purchase. Here's some photographs of the property. We'll go through them quickly. Currently it's used as a U-Haul, or at the point when I took the pictures, they were U-Haul and vehicle sales. It's next door to that storage facility. There's a office building in the middle of the property. On October 22nd, the Development Review Committee reviewed this request, and there's no comments, and there were no public comments at the Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this request, and they considered these factors. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Just a curiosity or for information. I guess I've always thought that a higher zoning, I'm not sure if we would agree what's higher or lower, but for example, in an I-2, that commercial, anything allowed in commercial will be allowed in I-2, but that's not the case. So could you talk to that?
Correct. Whenever we rewrote the zoning code back in 2018, part of that was trying to keep commercial uses in commercial zones to avoid making the piece of bread too large for the jam, if that makes sense. We have all these properties available, and it protects the investment of those properties that are zoned in commercial districts. So you're not popping up with these uses that really shouldn't be in a industrial district. Trying to keep those uses separated for the health and safety of the customers and to protect the investment of the property owners.
Well,
Prior to
may-
this- oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, maybe the same thing. So prior to that change that we made, would have a commercial endeavor like this been allowed in an I-2 zone?
I really don't know. I don't think it was.
Okay.
The
so
same
it's-
thing, yeah.
Right.
If anything, we've loosened whatever restrictions were on that in the previous code.
Okay, thank you.
During your studies and putting together what we learned from the comprehensive plan, use map, and so on, had this parcel been identified as kind of an outlier anyway?
Yeah, there are several properties in the city, but there's so much history with each property. We're
Sure.
not going to come in and tell them, you need to change this.
No.
But yeah, that's.
But you recognize this
Yeah.
one's.
So we were excited to see Tim Miller come in and request
Exactly.
this.
Perfect.
Just for the completionist in me, just make things look nice.
Procedurally, how did you notify the folks that we were doing it? Of course, the paper. We posted a sign, I assume?
Yeah, actually, I need to go take it down. It's taped to their post, the
Okay.
pole right now.
Okay.
So-
Any response to that? I know nobody at the meeting, but.
We have not received any phone calls about this
Okay.
request.
Very good.
Well, certainly follows what I like to see when I've commented in the past, a zoning down. especially, the more so when everything around it is commercial and or residential to the south.
Yes.
Any other questions of staff while we have it? Is there a motion?
I move to accept and approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve the request for an amendment to the Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map Section M17B of the 2017 to 2037 Comprehensive Plan for Hutchinson, Kansas, based on the finding of conformance to the factors required for approval. Adoption of an ordinance and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Cyrus Cavallo?
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6B, consider request to rezone the property at 935 East 4th Avenue.
Yes, hello, Aaron Barlow, Associate Planner. This is a two-step process since that was designated as commercial or as industrial, and we've now changed the land use designation. We have to do the rezone. Same story, same people, same maps, same photos. Oh, no photos. There are different factors to be considered though, and planning staff and the planning commission found that these 8 or 9 factors were met.
I know that some sturdy built folks are here. Did you want to make any comments? Might just explain just or describe just a little bit what you're planning?
Yes, I am Tim Miller with Sturdy Built Storage Barns, and we are, as you can tell, hoping and intending to bring storage buildings, which we've been building for over 40 years, into a retail location in Hutchinson. We've been serving the Hutchinson community, but we believe that we will be able to do that even better with better accessibility through a retail location there on 4th Street, and that's why we purchased the property. We do storage buildings, we do permanent structures, work with the staff here on a regular basis for those permits and those inspections and the things that are required there. So we're much more than just storage buildings, but that's what would sit on the lot there. We intend to continue U-Haul at the current time, subsidize with carport sales where we can, which I've been in conversation with city about those requirements as well.
Please.
And we do some patio furniture. I have left out a major component yet because you won't see it displayed there much, but it's garage doors. And so we would like to strengthen our service to the Hutchinson community, and we believe that a retail location there would improve that because people become more aware of what we offer to them. So assuming that this can go through, we would move that direction in the coming months. Do you have any questions for me on that?
Sounds good.
You mentioned that you do construction of permanent buildings. I'm aware of that. Will you be operating part of that element of the business out of that location, or might speak to that a little bit more, please?
We will definitely be open to visiting with any potential customer that would like to have a garage structure quoted to them or otherwise at that location, yes. Of course, we will adapt to that with staffing, et cetera, as we see what the level of interest and need there is. I should maybe also identify my brother Merlin Miller. He and I co-own it, having purchased the company from our father, Gary Miller, who founded it. And of course, it's been a family business. My grandpa was also involved. But we would be glad to continue what has been a good relationship with the city of Hutchinson. And yes, in whatever way that can be.
Sounds good.
I heard Nancy echo it as well, but please do, in your business, continue to communicate with the city, the planning department and such, as you identify these places, because carports, storage buildings, there are rules about these things, and we're constantly trying to evaluate these processes. Okay, you can't do it here, but why? And if we can identify where these people are, individuals, I should say, are asking for these type of deals, maybe we can identify where maybe we need to change on some of those things. So keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you.
You're
all.
welcome to Hutch officially in terms of having a
He's a little
local
premature. We
retail.
haven't voted yet.
Yeah,
That's true. we will welcome you to Hutch.
shortly.
Shortly.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for your words. Is there a motion?
Before, a
Oh,
question of
please.
Aaron. Aaron, given the variety of things that he listed, do those all fall into C2?
Yeah, the C4 zone, that would be allowed.
Excuse me.
If I can quickly go back to the photo of the property, you'll see a screened fence in the back there. So there is space for, oh gosh, I'm sorry, for if they were to have some sort of commercial vehicles back there, that's the ideal place to park them or to store things. It's already screened. It meets our requirements for that. But if they do make any changes to the lot, we would work with them and be flexible and within the bounds of our code.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
I move to accept and approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve the request to rezone 935 East 4th Avenue from I-2 Industrial District to C4 Special Commercial District based upon due consideration of the factors below, adoption of an ordinance, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. You've been serving Hutchinson for a long time, but officially welcome within Hutchinson. Steve was a little premature, but we knew it was coming. Thanks again. Sorry, Linda. Please, next time.
Item 6C, consider ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds.
Morning.
Good morning, Angela Richard, Director of Finance. We have two projects that are to the point that they are going to need bonded early spring of 2020. They are Main Street and the wastewater treatment facility intermediate pump station. Both of these projects have been presented to you. So as a reminder, Main Street was bid and is contracted to cost $3.5 million, with $800,000 being paid from reserves and then $431,000 being paid from prior bonding. So the remainder of 2.3 will be bonded. With the pump station, it's expected to cost $1.3 million. $700,000 will be paid from reserve, and we will bond the remaining $600,000. So we are asking you to adopt this ordinance that would allow us to bond $2.365 million and $650,000 to include bonding costs for those projects. According to IRS regulations, we have to approve this ordinance before we incur any hard costs with the projects in order to reimburse ourselves with bonding proceeds when we bond later on. Are there any questions?
Nope, we've done this many times.
Yes, we have.
Once or twice, huh?
Right?
Once or twice. Are you ready?
If you, yeah,
Yeah.
if there's no others. Yeah.
Okay, I will move to approve the ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds of the city of Hutchinson, Kansas, to pay the cost of certain improvements, all pursuant to Charter Ordinance Number 50 of the city, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6D, consider resolution for gap waiver.
We've done this once or twice as well.
Yep.
Yes, Angela Richard, Director of Finance. This is a yearly resolution that we have to pass in order to opt out of using generally accepted accounting principles. State statutes and the Kansas Board of Accountancy say we must use the generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, unless we opt to follow KSA 75-1120AC, opt out of GAAP, and instead use the Kansas regulatory basis of accounting. You will hear me call this KMAG, Kansas Municipal Audit and Accounting Guide. Defines those regulations. And I wanted to briefly point out some of the differences this year. With revenue under GAAP, we would recognize it when we earn it, when we're able to bill a customer, like utility bills. Under KMAG, we recognize it when we receive the cash. So KMAG is just recognizing the cash that you actually receive. And then with KMAG, we're not showing all of our liabilities on the face of the financial statements. Most of those are disclosed later in the financial statements, like how much we owe on bonds, how much we have in accrued sick and vacation leave. Those are disclosed on the footnotes. So those are a few of the key differences between the two. We've always opted to use KMAG because it's a simpler method of accounting. Most common consumers of our financial statements are able to understand it better than GAAP. And it's also a lower cost for our audit because it's not as complex. So the decision is yours to make whether we want to adopt the resolution to waive requirements of GAAP.
Don't we also, we're not forced to be on depreciation schedules for our fixed assets?
Exactly. We don't recognize assets on our financial statements, and therefore we do not depreciate them.
And this is the generally accepted among municipalities. I mean, don't most cities of the first class at
Most
least?
Most cities of the first class are actually using GAAP, like Salina, Wichita, Hayes uses GAAP.
Okay.
So we are probably one of the larger that does not, but most all other municipalities do use KMAG.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you see any value, I mean, not today, we're not doing this today, but any value to ever looking at going to GAAP?
That's interesting. I don't think it would benefit us in our day-to-day accounting. Some people think there is benefit to listing out the assets that you do have, not depreciating them necessarily, but listing those assets out, and that's the only real benefit I could see from it.
But accrual versus cash on the revenue side, that doesn't have any real.
No, it doesn't have any impact on us. And the way we operate, we're looking at what cash is coming in and what cash is going out on a daily basis. So
There was a time in the 90s, late 90s, this was kind of a trend and kind of the thing that everybody was looking at, and some communities did it. We did it in a former community I was in. And later on, as years passed, some of the information is it's not really a big benefit. It's just a philosophy maybe of a finance individual. But there's a lot of cost and a lot of effort to go into that.
I would assume there would be.
Identifying your assets,
Right.
water
It
lines,
does
sewer lines.
require more personnel.
More personnel.
But- manage.
But
The
from a
conversion
benefit-
cost would be huge, and then you mentioned the audit expense would be great on an annual basis.
It's
And you probably are familiar with GAAP from your former job, so you
yes, I only worked on 2 audits that used GAAP. All the other audits I worked on did use KMAG.
yeah.
So
Very good. That was more just curiosity than anything for myself anyways. Any other questions?
No.
Motion?
I move to approve an ordinance authorizing the issuance of move to approve resolution declaring that the requirements of KSA 75-1120AA are not relevant to the preparation of financial statements and reports, and waiving the requirement of conformity with said act in favor of conformity with the cash basis and budget laws of the state of Kansas, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6E, consider resolution appropriating funds to pay payrolls and claims for 2020.
It's the Angela Richards Day.
we're just getting everything out of the way. Angela Richard, Director of Finance. Another annual thing that we do is pass this resolution, and what it allows is us to pay our vendors weekly and payroll bi-weekly. You then receive the reports after we pay those claims in your council packets. It is after the fact. And why we feel comfortable doing this is because you have already adopted a budget that is fairly detailed, that helps form guidelines of where we can and can't spend money. We also have set purchasing policies, internal controls, and monthly reporting that we do in your packets as well. So we can oversee where we're spending those monies and paying vendors. So if we would like to continue on this basis, I would ask that you approve the resolution as submitted. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Okay, I move to approve the resolution providing for the appropriation by fund of the budget of the City of Hutchinson for the year beginning January 1, 2020, and appropriating money from the various funds to pay payrolls and claims against the City of Hutchinson for the calendar year 2020, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item. Thank you, Angela.
Item 7A, consider final plat for Noble replat.
Hello
Welcome
again.
back.
And here I am.
Hi, Aaron.
I have received a phone call from Dan Garber, the applicant for this request, and they've reached some hiccups in the, oh, it's not on here, some hiccups in the process, and would request that you table this
Oh.
request until the next meeting on December 17th,
Okay.
if that's possible.
Fars on? Yeah.
Don't see any reason why not. Okay, yeah, we can.
Do we need to make a formal motion to table or just?
No, we'll just put it on the next
Okay.
agenda.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. By far the easiest thing we've done. Next item, please.
Item 7B, consider contracts for property acquisition for Cow Creek Channel expansion.
Good morning.
Morning, Jeff.
Morning, Jeff.
Jeff Peterson, Director of Engineering. Today we have, well, actually in 2017, the city completed a stormwater master plan. It identified a number of different projects, of which the Cow Creek Channel expansion is one of them, and it's kind of the building blocks to some future projects going forward. So with that, the city's consultant has had some discussions with property owners in that area and in the process of trying to acquire those properties in the area where construction is going to be going on. So to date, we've received contracts for 3 of the properties that we're in the process of acquiring. So let's see, those 3 properties. In the total amount of all 3 properties is $42,500, and it involves 2 residences and 1 vacant lot. So with that, I'm just recommending the council approve the real estate purchase agreements with the owners for these 3 properties. Oh, and a side note, all these properties in the future are actually going to be in the 100-year floodplain when the FEMA maps are become effective next year too. So
Jeff,
there's
remind
some,
me what our total budget for a property acquisition was for that project.
I don't know that I can't remember the total budget for it right now. I think
I mean, are we tracking pretty well?
yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
right so
I mean,
far
this-
on this, what we had before.
How many more do we have?
I think we have, well, 2 major ones, and then there's a minor one that really doesn't have any frontage that we'll have to probably go through condemnation because we don't know where the owner is. But
Have we already been in conversations with the 2 major
Yes,
ones?
we have.
Okay. So that's
so-
in the works.
But these are the first ones that had agreed with the amounts going forward. So I think we're tracking pretty good right now.
Great.
How were the purchase prices, how were the purchase prices arrived at?
I believe, well, and we had talked about this, it is a, based on the county valuation for the most part, is what we're going for the purchase prices. And the idea was to give them our best price up front, and then they can decide how they want to proceed after that. So we don't have to go through the appraisal process and some of those things. We're trying to keep it potentially, so these purchases potentially could be, if they're willing sellers, some of the purchase prices may be able to be recovered later as we go through through some grant potentially or not. We don't know for sure, but there is that opportunity if we have willing sellers to go through that way.
You mentioned, I think, a couple of them have residential structures on them and maybe
Correct.
some other outbuildings. Those will be demolished, I take it?
They will.
How will we be using the property, the vacant property after the Cow Creek work is done?
Well, most of that area in between the 2 railroads there,
Mhm.
those will be probably, it'll be excavated out to where there's a channel and then some storage area for drainage when we have those high volume storms. So we won't have all the trees and those types of things. It'll just be more of an open area, kind of like along Cow Creek as you kind of come through town
Mhm.
where it's just an open area with grass and things, and
Just
then
a
a
green
pilot
space.
channel through the middle. Potentially, there's some recreational opportunities. We haven't really got to the point where we've saw the information on some of the options going forward, which that is expected probably in the next 30 days or so.
Okay, so the consultant is going to be developing or
Yeah, they're in the process of
proposing some
developing
options
those.
to
I mean,
broadening the usage?
surveying has taken place.
Mhm.
They've also talked with the railroads to kind of make sure everything's going to work out on some of the bridges and some different things. So there's things taking place in the background, but we haven't really seen any options yet. And they're going to provide some options and some costs going forward. But this area that we're shown there, well, that area is primarily the area where we know for sure we're going to need those properties going forward, so.
And can you also remind me of the timeline?
Well, the timeline, I think by next summer, we potentially will have some demo portions going on, and if we select our final option, then they'll be putting together plans for some of the options going forward in that area to be able to bid that maybe toward the end of this year, so.
Now, when this project is completed, will it be enough on the south side, the way the water runs, will it be enough to show significant improvement during the next flood event?
Well, that's the hope, and they're doing the modeling on that right now. The hope is to take some of the adjacent properties to there will also be in the floodplain. A portion of that we're hoping to get out of the floodplain after we complete the project. It also is, like I said, the first step of future projects that are north of the railroad, so we
Yeah.
can potentially help conveyance of stormwater as we go north up through 17th Avenue and those areas where we
So I
have
guess that was
problems.
my question. The pipes north are still going to be too
Undersized.
narrow
At this
to make a
point.
difference in some of those really big flooding areas.
There is that potential. However, there's a chance where if it can get down there, that it provides a little more storage and a lower elevation so more water can get out of
Yeah.
there. It's going to be very incremental at this
Yeah,
point, is
I know
what
it's
I'm
not
going
an
to say.
overnight thing,
It
but
is not an
you get a lot
overnight
of
thing.
feedback from the community that we're doing all of these water line projects and they're not making a difference, and that's because we don't have this
Right. We
really
have,
big first step.
we have aging infrastructure, of course. The older infrastructure, of course, was downtown going north, and we're kind of got to replace that incrementally from the bottom to the top again.
Yeah.
So.
We've done some projects, I don't want to call them minor, but of smaller scale that we've gone along. This was somewhat put on hold because we were hoping to get some money
Correct.
from FEMA. When that wasn't realized, then we start moving forward.
Correct.
Again, to what Jade was saying, there's been some discussion, I'm paying my stormwater utility fees, how come I'm not seeing any relief? What's going on? This is going to be our first major
It is our first
project.
major one. And the initial estimates on construction for this portion is about $10 million. So that takes a lot of our stormwater funds going forward, and then we'll have to kind of time out the next projects as we can,
accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
whether we bond those or we pay for them outright. So
Well, I think this is exciting
Good
to
first
see move
step.
forward. It's something we've needed to do for a couple decades.
Right.
So,
Very good. Any other questions of the staff while we got them up?
I know Jade, I thought Jade asked the question, but maybe I'm just.
maybe I
how
didn't
many-
answer it.
Well, no, how many more properties are there to be obtained?
There's two major, some of those properties the city already owns.
Okay.
Or there's the right of way for like Avenue E going
Mhm.
across there. There's a couple properties that still yet to need.
There's 4 in this area right here.
4 more
4 additional is
to
this
the 3, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. That we don't already.
I mean, that we're in
oh,
process.
They're in
they're
process with
process.
discussions with them on negotiations, but they're not final yet. by any
Are the
means.
consultants the party doing the negotiating essentially, or we, or
Yeah, the
staff?
consultants had hired
They hired.
the person, which is, let's see,
Okay.
It's a real
Land
estate-
Acquisitions Incorporated out of Wichita, doing the negotiations and the contacting of
Okay.
the people. I sent initial letters out to all the property owners, but then they followed up with discussions and those types of things and negotiations with them, so.
One last thing, I was also under the impression that with these acquisitions, we could still go forward with the project, right? These are the have-to-have kind of
Yeah, yes.
properties.
And And those last few too. That
Okay.
were, so.
Okay. Any other questions or a motion?
I move to approve the real estate purchase contracts with Joe and Melinda Richardson, Michael Amos Taylor, and Andover Rental, Inc., and authorize the mayor to sign the contracts and all other documents necessary to complete the transfer of these properties to the city of Hutchinson.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item.
Item 7C, consider 2020 street maintenance program.
Again, Jeff Peterson, Director of Engineering. Today I'm going to go over some of the information concerning the arterial and residential street maintenance program for next year, or the 2020. We'll get this up here soon. There we go. First of all, when we start talking about the arterial and residential street maintenance program, I wanted to kind of just go into the cost for this next year. What's budgeted, what's in the budget for 2020 is the $1,595,000 for arterial maintenance and $1,002,000 for residential maintenance. And as you can see, the funding for those come from a lot of sources that are kind of put together to make up those funds. First of all, we of course have the federal fund exchange, which we get each year, which we get 90 cents on the dollar for federal funds, so we can apply those funds to any street project within the community as we see fit. Of course, the quarter-cent sales tax, which benefits us as well as the Cosmosphere and Stratica, and a little bit of property tax relief, an amount of about $1 million per year.
Do you recall, I was trying to rack my brain, when that sales tax comes up for consideration again?
2024.
It is 24? Okay.
Okay, I don't, but I'm glad Paul
Someone
does.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you, Paul.
So this year we have $350,000 from the growth fund, and then $200,000 from the special street fund, and then we have the street reserve funds, and this is about $600,000, which these funds are getting smaller and smaller each year because we don't really add funds to that. It's based on the difference between our bids and what the actual project costs are. So if we use all these funds and all the projects are exactly what the budgeted costs are, we'll probably only have $200,000 to $400,000 left
In the reserve?
in the reserve. So potentially going forward, our street projects or our street maintenance portion of our budgets potentially could be less if we can't find any other outside sources to kind of keep them up to the levels we'd like to have them at. So
Did we don't have any established minimums on those reserve funds, do we?
Not have any what, correct?
Established
minimums?
No.
I didn't think so.
not on those, but anyway, that's kind of, so this year we're using a bigger, I guess, bite of that, but in the past years we've used like $200,000 or $300,000 from reserves. This time it's a little higher. Back in
Jeff, how
2000,
does, I'm sorry,
Go
how
ahead.
does this total amount, 2.6, I think it was, compare to the last several years?
last year was 2.1 million, and the year before that, I believe, was 2.4 million. The last couple of years, and it's been up and down over the past few years, depending on kind of how our budgets were. So this year's a little bit higher than we've had in the past few years, and we moved around some of the different reserves that we typically have, like, and I'll go into it a little bit, but we didn't fund the crack seal reserve this year, and we put that money in directly into the arterial residential projects, because we had enough to go for a year without funding that one. But next year we'll have to put money into that one again. So there's going to be some shuffling a little bit for 2021. But
Well, it seems like the additional moisture events have wreaked a little bit more havoc on our streets in the last year or so. I think we're justified in probably putting more resources into it this year.
Of course,
Still
I would
not
like to
enough.
have more, but,
Yeah.
but that's, it is the way of budgets. But this is pavement condition index. Back in 2012 and then also in 2018, we had IMS, infrastructure management systems, come in and develop kind of our pavement condition survey. What the pavement condition index, it takes an inventory of each of our streets and kind of identifies the conditions of the streets. It takes the amount of cracks, the type of cracking, whether they're longitudinal or transverse cracking or alligator cracking, where it's the smaller pieces or the cracks are a lot smaller. Also, it takes some of the street defects or rutting, and even takes into account some of the base condition to develop this pavement condition index, or PCI. So the higher the number, of course, is the better. So if it's 100, it's the best condition, and it goes down to the poorer conditions. Back in 2012, the pavement condition was 70, which that's the overall pavement condition for the cities, which is between good and very good. In 2018, the pavement condition index was 65, so we've had some lowering of the pavement condition throughout the community. So at that time, they did suggest about $3.1 to $3.3 million per year to fund our street program based on the conditions, to kind of try to get it to maintain about that 70 level, and that's what we'd prefer to do, but we try to make do with what we have too. So, and some of you guys have seen this before, I know, but we bring it up. When new pavement conditions are typically, they start out excellent and they drop fairly slowly in the how good they are for the first 15 years or so. If we can complete maintenance within those time periods, which most of our streets are older than that, but we try to stay in that the saw kind of condition after the 15 years, where we improve it and it goes back down, and improve it and goes back down. So, but we get it too far gone, then we do have a lot more costs with maybe potentially reconstruction or a deeper mill and overlay or those types of things. So research has shown that about $1 of preventive maintenance earlier in the life of a street can save $6 to $10 going forward, which if we can keep from doing total rehabilitation or reconstruction, then that kind of can save us some money going forward. So our goal is really to keep the streets in good condition and minimize the number of streets that require reconstruction going forward.
Going back, looking at what you described as, I think, saw blades or saw teeth. What period of time are those preventative maintenance efforts buying us, so to speak, in terms of
well, it varies. Years? For our residential streets, we would like to do those every 7 to 8 years. We're close to that right at the moment, but it'll be changing over the next few years depending on budgets going forward. For our trails and residentials, right now it's recommended between 15 and 20 years, because we typically do a better treatment. We need to either do a mill and overlay or some ones that actually last a little longer. So that's kind of the thoughts on those.
So we basically kind of get a half-life extension.
Correct.
During that.
Yeah, because we're not reconstructing them back to
right.
brand new per se, with the maintenance portions. So one of the first things that the city does for their street maintenance program, of course, is what I talked about a little bit, is about street the ceiling, the crack ceiling. It's completed by city forces each year, and typically it's done on all the streets that we're going to include in our arterial and residential maintenance program. So we try to do that out in front of the projects as we can, and then we have other streets that need crack sealed, like Main Street and others, that if we have time, we try to get to those also. But so that's kind of the first, and it's really the most economical defense of letting water get down into the cracks and then impacting the subgrade going forward. So another portion of our maintenance programs, actually our drainage complaints or our curb and gutter repairs each year. We allot about $100,000 each year from the stormwater side, stormwater utility, to repair these locations where you have water standing out into the street. We repair those first. If water's staying in the curb and gutter, that's kind of our second priority if we have enough funds to do, which we don't always. But so we're just trying to take care of those problems that do impact actually the street subbase and things like that going forward, so we can keep the streets in as good a condition as we can. So we do try to be the last 5 years or so, we've been proactive in doing that, about $100,000. The last couple of years, we've spent about $150,000 a year just to try to catch up on some of the worst cases.
How do you apply the curb and gutter repair on the brick streets that we have?
That's
Or how do
probably
you not
more on
apply?
an as-needed basis. We do look at that periodically. The street department has some funds that they do a little bit of repairs too on those. So they're probably not looked at as tight as these, because really we're looking at these in the areas where we're going to have projects.
Related to the asphalt repair that's being done?
Correct, so. But that's a good question, and it does show that there is a need there too. I know that.
That's probably one of the biggest complaints we get is in areas where the street's in good shape, but the gutters
are
on the
not.
right, just it holds water, and when people are irrigating, it's got water in it all year long, and I think we've got a waiting list.
Well, and there's a number of years we weren't able to hardly do any.
Yeah.
So we just take the complaints, and we have those all logged, and we kind of try to take care of the ones we can each year within our what we
Right.
allot for that.
A lot of these areas are just very, very, very flat. Drainage is hard anyway, and if there's any kind of
Correct.
settlement.
Or if a tree grows up in one area,
Right.
it holds water. But this is an important part of our street program also going forward. Then it comes down to the different methods we've been using for street maintenance. Chip seal, which we have used primarily in the residential areas, and a little bit of double chip seal and some other variations of that in some of the lower traveled collector streets and those two. This is where, of course, the asphalt is sprayed onto the street and then chips are placed. And then it's rolled into the surface a bit, and then after a few days it's swept off. This is one of the most inexpensive ways we do to maintain some of our streets and keep them sealed up to try to keep water from getting down in the subbase. This year we're trying a couple new ones. Jeff Shank, who's in the audience also, he's helped me do some research on different options that potentially could help us out in areas where we have streets that have a little higher number of cracks, or things that we can't just really get sealed, like the alligator cracking. And this one is where they spray asphalt on, and there's a scrub broom that forces the liquid into all the cracks at the same time. The one benefit of this, the city doesn't have to do the crack sealing before this type of process. So, and then it's just a regular chip seal after that. The city of Wichita's been using that, and we did go and go research that and look at those streets that they've done that, and they had some that are in pretty bad shape that were almost to the point of needing like a mill and overlay. And back in 2015 they did this scrub seal process, and we went back last summer and it's holding up pretty well. So I think we can get some life from our streets, those ones that are getting a little farther gone than just need a standard chip seal. And we're going to try that on some locations this year, and you'll see that on the maps coming forward. So in addition to that, the city of Wichita has also did what they call a cape seal, really, which is just combining two different types of treatments: a chip seal with a slurry seal on top of it. So the chip seal has a little coarser aggregate, and then the slurry seal is more of a slurry, finer aggregate, so it fills in the spaces in between the chips. It is a little higher cost, but it really does provide what we think is a pretty good seal on some of our streets. And it's still more inexpensive than a total mill and overlay at this point.
Are each of the two newer items, the scrub and the cape, kind of a step
Yes, they
higher?
are. They
or-
are a step higher.
Okay.
And we're starting to need to do that in some of our streets, so we can kind of make them last as long as they can, but maybe still to hold them together before we have to do a full-scale reconstruction or mill and overlay.
And in your looking at Wichita or wherever, what's their experience been in terms of longevity of that?
Well,
the
so
scrub
far
or the,
it's only about 5 years, but they started in 2015 doing some of these, and we went to the ones they initially did first, and the condition of their streets are in still very good shape for those. It's in some of the lower trafficked areas, but I mean, it's not on main thoroughfares, of course, but I think they've had some good luck with that, and they're very happy with it so far. So at least the way they indicated. But we did look at other options too, but these are the ones that kind of rose to the top that I think would serve us the best. With the
So we hope to get a
streets.
little more time out of say, a scrub or a cape versus a chip or double chip?
Correct, a little bit, yeah, because it's essentially kind of a double seal on the streets, so. And then, of course, we have our mill and overlays that we do on primarily just our arterials and collectors that have the higher trafficked areas that we want to have a nice smooth surface all the time to try to keep them going as long as we can. So some of our streets, I mean, it keeps the longevity a little bit longer than those other processes too. So we don't have to be visiting those locations as often. So this is just a slide I added in. These are what the PCI change, like it changed 1 or 2 levels, like from excellent to good or very good to marginal. These are the streets in the community that have changed. Either like the darker red is the greater than 3 levels, and it kind of goes to green where it's actually there's been an improvement. Typically where there's been an improvement, there's been a street project right before that, or we maintain those streets beforehand. This information was gathered in the fall of 2017, so you can see some of them we have already done. If you look at Airport Road, it was showing some degradation, and now we have since resurfaced that. So, or you could even say areas like in Countryside or the northwest part of the community, we've did chip seals there, so those have improved. But it kind of shows you where the next area needs to be. And with IMS, they did provide us kind of a schedule that we went by, and then we reviewed. The city went around and checked those streets out and put in our own comments, and we've kind of revised that to where we thought the project should be, and then we sized them to what we thought our funding would go to. So now getting down to our residential street projects, here's the different options. We're doing double chip seal, some single chip seal. The asphalt overlay will be on the arterial portion. The scrub seal we're going to do on some of the collector streets, for instance, like Severance Street from Blanchard to Avenue C, Blanchard Street from Cary Park to K61, and Halstead Street from Avenue G north, just to north of Cary Boulevard. Some of those streets are getting to need some work, and we thought those were good candidates for those types of the scrub seal portions.
So what were you doing on Halstead? You're going south?
We're
to
going
G?
from Avenue G north to just north of Cary Boulevard
Okay.
at this point. There's still a north of Cary Boulevard to 4th Avenue, which at some point is going to need something too.
Yeah, it's going to need like
that's a
a
biggie.
complete gutting.
Yeah, I know. But
Yeah.
some of the traffic is lessened a little bit with the concrete plant not being in operation there.
Yeah.
So there'll be a little less traffic on that for the time being, but that's still in the process. There's a number of other streets that are needed. There's a lot of candidates. I wish we could do more, all of
Yeah.
them, but I mean, there's always going to be one that's like, why didn't we do this one? But we do try to keep the projects in areas where they can be a whole area get covered on these. So
Could
go
you
ahead.
do me a favor and kind of toggle for me a little bit? I know that area is
Yep.
south of 17th that we're doing a
Yeah,
lot of
and
work.
it had, if you look,
Could you, yeah, thank you.
you can see
Toggle.
that area has I can do this pointer here too.
Yeah, is that 17? Okay.
It's right in that area.
Okay, and that is red.
It is red. So it's kind of, the PCI change kind of shows you where you've been lately and where you need to go next,
Right.
for the most part. But we don't do the studies every year. If we did the every year, you could probably see the different areas move throughout the community, but that's right in that
And
area.
again, it goes without saying that is identified as an area where, I don't want to say ounce of prevention, pound of cure, but when you showed us the precipitous drop, money well spent here to keep us above fair.
That's the
rates.
hope, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Jeff, will all streets be attended and receive work through a course of time?
yes, I can't really predict the amount of time right now. Right now, we're fairly close to being, like, for residentials, like I said, to being on the 7 to 8 year cycle, but that changes from year to year. Some years we're able to kind of keep on that, and some years, depending on budgeting, we are not able to cover as much. That's why we're trying to do some of these alternate treatments to make things go a little further, but still provides some good maintenance on our streets.
Is a 5-6 year plan to look at the PCI? Is that
Yeah.
what you're hoping to do?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just did that in
That's
18. You
correct.
hope to look again in 2023 and kind of see where you're at.
Yeah, that would be the hope. If we can, because it kind of gives us a snapshot of just
Sure.
that time period of the condition of our streets, or as a whole. It's hard to look at this and just know where are we at? But they kind of compile that all for us, and it does provide us some good information and a good plan going forward also. So this is just a little bit of information and this is just for a regular chip seal, just to give an idea. It costs $186 a square yard, and it's stayed relatively stable since 2016. The costs are higher if we do a double chip seal or a fog seal or some other options, which we do on a regular basis. But like I said, our goal is to seal the streets every 7 to 8 years. Right now, we're reasonably close to that, but we'll see how we go in further years. And then if conditions, like I said, if we have streets that continue to deteriorate a little bit more, some of those alternate methods that are higher cost may need to begin to be utilized more often on our streets.
How much higher cost?
Well, we haven't bid them yet, but the estimate for if we do a single chip seal, like I said, it's about $186.
Mm-hmm.
For a scrub seal, it could be about $4 to $4.50. And then for like a cape seal, could be like $6 per square yard. So there's quite a big change, but it's still about half or less than half the cost of a
Mill and overlay.
or even or more would be for a reconstruction. So. And then here's our mill and overlay portion of the projects this year, which would be Plum Street from Cary Park to Avenue E, which is just south of the existing bridge on Cary Park, and the area we're going to be doing some work for the Cow Creek expansion. And that area has been resurfaced a little bit before this other portion. Avenue G from Plum to William Street, Enterprise Street from Halsted to Airport Road, and 4th Avenue from Fontron Street to Airport Road. Those are the main ones this year, so for the mill and overlay portion. And then I gave you the cost of just a single chip seal for typical mill and overlay projects. They've been fairly close to, fairly consistent, but last year was a little bit higher because we had quite a bit more base repair on some of our streets. So that you can see that is reflected in the higher cost last year, the $13.17 per square yard. Like I said, we're starting to use some of the other methods on some of our lower volume streets in an effort to keep their condition better longer without having to do a total reconstruct. So, and that's it, I guess. So, any other questions? With that, I'd recommend approval of our arterial and residential projects for next year.
Yeah, any other questions of Jeff while we got him up there?
I might not have all the answers, but
I move we accept the city's 2020 street maintenance program.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is. It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Thank
Jeff. Next item, please.
Item 7D, consider grant of right-of-way for Evergy transmission line project.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, you probably heard about this project. I mentioned it sometime back in a weekly communication, as well as there's been some public comment on it. Evergy, which is former Westar, is in the process of acquiring and really in most cases reacquiring easement or right-of-way for the transmission line that runs from the south side of town all the way north, basically from just south of 4th, Van Buren in that area, all the way up to 30th, right by the convenience store up there where they've got a big substation. So it's roughly a 2.5-mile corridor. And essentially what they're doing is replacing the existing transmission lines with a new system, a monopole. If you're familiar with that area, they've got the big lattice type, bracket type stands, towers for the transmission line. And so they're putting in a sleeker, and it's a big monopole, it's a big pole. I think they're going from 7 lines down to roughly 3. And so they're planning to complete this work, I think, in the fall of 2021. And so they went through this whole corridor and essentially compensated all the existing property owners for right-of-way that they actually already own, cleaning up some areas. In our case, there's some additional right-of-way that they're acquiring from us in the Harsha Park area. And I'm probably the worst in terms of presentations on the board like our staff does. But in your packet, and those of you, if you want to look over my shoulder, you can. But in your packet is the map kind of showing the aerial of the corridor that actually we're talking about for the city. And so the biggest piece of this that they're acquiring some additional right-of-way for us is up on Harsha Park. And that accounts for about $53,000 of the total compensation of $63,600 that they're proposing to pay the city. And again, I have to emphasize that this is right-of-way essentially that they already own. They had a public meeting back in November, on November 14th, for all the adjoining property owners, compensating them for easement again that they already had. With that, basically, we'd stand for any questions that you might have on this right-of-way grant.
Why do we have to grant the right-of-way if they already have it?
They do, and that was my point. Is we're basically, they're kind of reacquiring. It's kind of because I asked that same question. Is you've got this, and I think in a lot of their legals, they're cleaning up a lot of things. They've got some people in this corridor that have built garages or sheds in the area.
Yeah.
They're having to remove those, move them. I think they're being compensated for that. I think West Star Evergy's being very fair really through this whole process. But I looked up at Harsha Park, and if you go up there, that's a park that's, some call it the Lost Park. It is a park. We haven't done much there over the years, and you can see where the line kind of comes to the east of that. And I think this additional right-of-way they're buying from us actually moves that right-of-way over to the eastern edge of Harsha Park there, up there you can see in the green area. So.
And I visited with John too, just for clarification, knowing that Westar became Evergy who was at KCPL, I believe.
Yeah.
Was this a process that was started after that merger or before? And he assured me this has been going on for a while.
We had a conversation with Westar, I don't know, it seems like it's probably been almost a year ago that this was up and coming. And I believe, and I base this on the fact I haven't heard a whole lot, but that they've had pretty good success working with the individual private property owners along the corridor in kind of reestablishing their easement right-of-way. So.
Are there any plans for that park in the park's master plan?
We're
So
we'll
glad
probably
you
have
asked
that conversation, and I think there is an opportunity maybe to do something there with. I'm not going to steal some thunder from other people, but yeah. So
this may or may not be the
there
time,
is.
but there is some things that we were addressing. I was actually going to bring it up in my official report. We could have some additional conversation about that as well.
Great.
But yeah, I think that would be and looking up there yesterday, and it's been a while since I've been to that park, but and the mayor pointed out, and Justin, it's really a pretty good opportunity for a nice trailhead there, because the trail is right there. Maybe you can tell where people have parked cars on the grass in the park, and it's kind of wore out, rutted out, and so there may be some opportunities to kind of really redefine that as a major trailhead.
Very cool.
And kind of along the same line that Jade had asked, so the $63,600 is paying us for additional easement right, or it's also kind of the whole thing easement rights?
The $53,600 of that is really for new right-of-way
Okay.
in the Harsha Park. The balance of that is just to
A little here,
a little here, a little there
Okay.
of easement that they already have, and and looking at what they're proposing, I think it probably cleans up I realize these are big poles, but
Yeah.
if you look at what's there now, we've got major towers there, 7-wire, and they're going to reducing that, and So I think it's maybe a bit of a better situation for adjoining property owners. Of course, they've lived with that for many, many years.
So they're actually reducing the number of wires, you said?
From 7, I thought, to 3, maybe it was 4 strands. But there will actually be more poles than there are current towers, but they're smaller footprint, if you will. And I don't have all the details of those in the particular neighborhoods, but you can drive through there and get a pretty good picture of what is currently there.
Yeah, I know I'm about a half a block away from a set there in Countryside West Development, and they're probably every half mile, probably quarter mile, less than that even.
Yeah, probably
those
less.
Large triangular type structures or whatever that I was always wanting to climb upon, but thankfully did not and as a young man. But
Jeff, did you go to you weren't at the open house, right? Yeah, I was out of town when they had
Yeah,
that.
I did.
So I'm curious how that went. I think it went pretty well. And I've talked to a couple property owners that called with questions and, basically, just you've already got the easement or the right of way. They've already got that. They're just compensating you for that again, if you will.
I think there was a little bit of a reference earlier, but how do these compare to the polls that I know were in the news regarding Wichita?
Size-wise, I don't. I looked at those, and I would say pretty comparable, probably.
As I recall, though, those were like smack dab in the middle of residential areas.
By churches.
Yeah, and again,
Or didn't exist.
they're already there. Yeah, they had wood poles replacing with these, and that's
There
part of the issue.
there were poles, there were lines. They
I
just went to the mono steel.
Right. And I think they were going the opposite direction. I think it was a wood pole with probably less of a footprint, and they went to a much larger
Right.
footprint
Yeah.
with
Which
the larger
created the-
poles and probably more transmission lines, whereas we would be going from the larger A-frame structure to a smaller pole with less lines. So same but different, same poles, I think. But,
Right.
But kind of a different.
Different.
rationale.
Okay. Okay. No.
Okay. Yeah, any other questions of John, or is there a motion?
I will move to approve the grant of right-of-way and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Instein?
Yes, thank you. Next item.
Item 8, report of city officials.
This is what we were hinting at. So, what do they say about great minds thinking alike, or something to that effect? When John and I were visiting in our pre-meeting about this, I was asking what, were we anticipating this money? Is this money budgeted? Is this, and essentially we came to the conclusion that this was, I hate to use the expression, but found money, and that it would go into the general fund and so on. I identified, as you would as well, is this maybe an opportunity to benefit Harsha Park? And so, in an area where they could be affected, because it is part of the right-of-way situation. So I asked Justin, and Justin, if you wouldn't mind joining me up here, if you're prepared, to put together just a pie in the sky kind of thing. What can we do with the $63 some odd thousand or whatever that we did? And he was able to make this go a lot further than I had anticipated. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with me, or with us, excuse me, the group, what you were able to come up with.
Yeah, good morning. Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. So yesterday I just kind of, off the top of my head, I guess, did a little bit of research and thinking about if we had approximately $60,000, what would that look like at Harsha Park? The example I came up with was we could do a small parking lot. There are people parking on the grass now, so I think 5 cars and an ADA stall as well. Better access to the trail for the neighborhood, so like a sidewalk basically, or something that connected that neighborhood to the trail. Also, another idea was convert the softball field to a rectangle field, so soccer/football. Those get a lot more drop-in use than do softball fields. That softball field is really only used for practice for really little kids, so it's really underutilized, and it takes up the majority of the park. So that includes some irrigation, some leveling, those sorts of things. And then also have always wanted to do something along the trail. The trail is kind of the biggest part of that park, biggest feature in the park. So maybe some outdoor exercise stations that you could come off the trail and do some sit-ups or do some sort of exercise in individual stations. So 4 or 5 stations along the trail. So that's kind of what I came up with. Also, I threw a little bit in there just for some additional traditional park amenities. So a small picnic shelter, benches, picnic tables, those sorts of things. So it doesn't go a long ways. I stayed away from a traditional playground in that example. With the playground, we'd eat up almost all of it. And so I was kind of going a different direction with it. But that's just one example that I came up with a couple hours of notice on that.
And I did put him under the gun, so to speak, yesterday.
Yeah.
With that also, would you kind of remind us about Harsha Park and where it falls within the Park Master Plan?
Yeah, so Harsha, after that plan, has really been on my radar as one of our highest priorities. It's the 4th lowest ranking park as far as active components, because there really is nothing there. So the other reason why it's been on my list is also it's in a neighborhood that doesn't have access to parks with active components. It's really not far from Rice Park, but you have a major street in between. There's a lot of residents close by. So I know we looked at lots of different maps at the master plan. There was a map that had different colors. Purple was the best where you had good access, and then it kind of faded from there. This would actually visibly change that map if we were to add some active components there, from a yellow to a purple. So it would show an improvement on that map. So that park specifically has been on my radar for those 2 reasons.
And I've had some communications with some individuals that live in the neighborhood that have reached out to me, independent of all of this conversation, well in advance of this, asking how can we just get a simple picnic table, something.
Yeah.
So then I start paying attention, same thing, saw the cars parked on the grass. If you see cars parking on the grass, that's where the parking spot goes. I saw the goat trails, if you will, where people are walking across. That tells me that's where you need a sidewalk. And so it seemed like also then going back to the circles that he was describing, it would greatly improve the concentric circles along that corridor as well. So the reason I bring this up was I was wanting to feel out the council themselves and see if there was any interest in earmarking those newly found funds towards Harsha Park, an area that's along that easement, along that right of way, but that could also benefit from those funds that we just garnered. And I leave it to you to ask questions or commentary, or if there's any interest in doing so.
I don't have any problem with it. I think we need to look at it in the context of the whole overall master plan, and we're tentatively scheduled to have a meeting to discuss that, right?
Yep.
True.
So, I think that's definitely a topic for consideration during the meeting.
And none of this is set in stone
No.
by
Yeah.
any means.
Yeah.
I meant to say that at the beginning because some people might take exception to the soccer field versus the ball diamond or some other things. But
It's just part of a larger discussion.
yeah, okay. But there's at least some interest maybe
Yeah.
in furthering
I don't
the
have a
conversation.
problem with it.
And I would,
Go ahead.
Councilman Davine obviously isn't here.
Sure. And I'm not asking for action or anything like that,
Yeah.
obviously.
And I know John's had a lot of communication with some of the constituents up in that area about this very issue over the past year or so. So I know, just wanted to mention that.
There'd be some
And
interest possibly
he
there
might
as
have
well.
some interest in that.
Yeah.
But I do agree it might be better to talk about it, in a different setting. There might be some neighborhood input up there as to what might benefit as well too.
Yeah.
So.
And Nancy, that brings up a good point. That
Yeah.
meeting is imminent, so that would be
Yeah.
a great opportunity to get that on the table.
Yeah, I can bring that map and kind of show you what it
you
would
know,
do if we
a
were to
little bit
invest
more
there.
detail.
If you want to fine tune some of this, you'll have a
Yeah.
little more time
Yeah.
to do so. So that would, Steve, you were going
A
to say
whole
something.
week.
Right.
This is just northwest of Creekside, the new neighborhood. Am I
Correct.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite meet. Yeah, I
The
think
Creekside ends at 11th on its
correct.
northern boundary.
Yeah.
But I would imagine some of the concentric circles of positive impact would probably stretch into part of
It would.
the
yeah.
Creekside
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Mm.
Does the money have to go to parks? Could we choose to use it in another location?
No, it does
That's
not.
not
have
to
go
say
to
this
parks.
isn't certainly a
It's
well
found money, it
worthwhile.
will go into the general fund.
It would just go into
otherwise.
the general fund.
It would
Yeah.
go in the general fund, yeah. allocated some form of fashion.
Has there been any thought, John, to utilization of 63,000 elsewhere besides, in this case, Harsha Park?
No, we have not had any kind of conversation like that, and, initially it would just be part of our fund balance, and, we struggle with that as well, but I'm certainly, probably around the room, there's probably up there, other ideas on how it can be spent, so, but, yeah, we have not gone that far.
What's that?
So I'm sure we've all got a few.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, I'd ask you if you could bring this back to us at the next meeting as well. I just wanted to kind of put it out there so it wasn't out of left field.
Yeah.
See if there was at least some interest in continuing the conversation. I think it would be a win for that area that's going to be directly impacted potentially with the right-of-way and all that. So thank you for putting together short notice as well. All right. Let's see. I will start to my right. Nancy.
Nothing this week.
Steve, anything to add?
No, thank you.
Jade.
I had one item, much like the city, the county is in the process of hiring a head administrator. And tomorrow they will be having a public reception to meet the county administrator finalists. So if you're interested in giving your input or in meeting the 3 finalists for the county administrator position, the reception is tomorrow, Wednesday at 6 p.m. at the Crystal Ballroom just down the street, 3 West Avenue B. So I hope we get a lot of people there who can have their say in who the leader of the county is.
Very good. Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to have a huge impact, much like our new management position as well. All right. Other than the park piece, that's all I had to offer at this point. John?
Just bring up the joint study session with the Huts Rec Commission on December, is that 10th, did I say? 10th, yeah, 8 a.m. And basically the purpose of that would be to kind of review the master plan that you all saw sometime back and kind of what we've accomplished since then, and then talk a little bit about goals going forward. And so, Justin, we didn't pick a location. We'll do it back here at 8 a.m. We'll have an agenda go out on that. So
Would that be 8 to 10 or 8 to 9?
Be just 1 hour.
Okay.
I might squeeze another item on there, study session item. I haven't figured that out yet, but we might utilize that. But is a time 8 to 10? It wouldn't be any longer than that. So, but I think
You
this.
know how I love 8 o'clock meetings.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Nancy, did you want to push it up to 7:30?
John wasn't
Push
here
it
to
back?
suggest
I'll
Yeah.
live with it. John, what are you tell me 7:30?
Right.
I know.
And then just a note, we continue to work on the Hotel Convention Center project, and I'm not going to talk all the specifics about that, but we met again last week. We had our developer tour the facility, current facility, looking at some options there. I was able to obtain a set of plans from when that was added on back in 2003-4 era. Have gotten those to the developer, and we're continuing to work with our task force. So, and I think, Mayor, that is all I would have at this time.
Very good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
It has been seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Yes.
I failed to when I had my turn, but I'm glad to see some folks in the audience that apparently didn't have a specific item that they wanted to get up and address. It's good to see folks that are just wanting to be here to view.
Very good. That's true.
That's what I wanted to say, but when you asked me,
You blanked.
I blanked, yeah.
It happens.